Live from Houston, Texas, the humidity capital of the world, it's time for Money for Lunch, where we feed your brain and your business with supersized portions of business and financial news. Now your host, Bert Martinez.
Hey, guys, we are back. I am your host, Bert Martinez, and you are tuning in to Money for Lunch. Today, I think it's going to be an especially good show. Typically, we always have a good show, but today's guests are, I think, exceptionally awesome. I think you're going to find it a lot of fun and very informative. My first guest is Francis Jackson. He's a best-selling author and disability lawyer, as well as one of our regular contributors. You know, one of the things that I like about Francis is that he really is helping people. He works with a lot of vets, if you will, and I think it's got to be rewarding when you're helping people solve some serious problems. Francis Jackson is an attorney who specializes in disability law for those seeking Veterans Disability Benefits and Social Security Disability Benefits. A founding partner of Jackson and MacNichol, he has been featured on NBC, CBS, ABC, and Fox Network affiliates around the country. He most recently appeared as a guest on Ben Glass on the Consumer Advocate show discussing benefits for veterans and Social Security disability benefits and how his practice allows him to make a difference in the lives of people facing these disabilities. He's also been quoted in USA Today and is listed in Cambridge Who's Who. Mr. Jackson was honored by the National Academy of Best-Selling Authors with a Quilly Award in September of 2012 for his contribution as a joint author to the best-selling book, Protect and Defend, where he wrote about protecting one's rights to veterans' disability compensation. As always, Francis, welcome to Money for Lunch.
Thanks, Bert. Nice to be here.
You bet, man. And you know what? I'm glad we're talking about this topic because it's kind of timely. I mean, especially this week with Memorial Day and people really thinking about, you know, the veterans and the contribution that our brave men and women do. So I'm glad that we're going to be talking about this topic. And so my first question to you is this. How does someone, let's say in the Gulf War, apply for disability benefits?
Actually, it's pretty simple, Bert. All they have to do is contact the local office of the Veterans Administration, the Department of Veterans Affairs, technically, and those folks will get them started. But it's now possible to do it online. You can go to www.va.gov, and if you poke around their website a little bit, you'll find an online application that you can submit. The VA is just starting a campaign to make their files electronic. For years, they've been kind of behind the curve and have had these paper files that get pretty huge, but they're now moving into the electronic age, so it's possible now to apply online.
Gotcha. Let me ask you this. Who is considered a Gulf War veteran?
Well, actually, that's a pretty inclusive term, so I'm glad you asked, Bert. It's broader than some might think. It's anyone who has served in the armed forces since August 2 of 1990, and it covers people who served anywhere in the Middle East, including places like Iraq and all through the what they call the Southwest Asia Theater of Operations, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, the Gulf of Aden, the Gulf of Oman, the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, the Red Sea, and even if you just flew over with the Air Force, you're considered a Gulf War veteran.
Wow, that is pretty broad, and I'm amazed that just by flying over, you get to participate in some of those benefits. That's pretty nice.
Well, you know, it's sort of a strange situation, Bert. The medical people really are quite mystified about it, but there are several good studies. The most recent one is from April of 2010, and it was sponsored by the VA and conducted by the Institute of Medicine, which is part of the National Academy of Science. And they concluded, again, there had been other research previously that came to the same result, but they did a pretty major study, and they concluded that these folks, for reasons that nobody can really totally identify, frequently suffer from this strange constellation of symptoms. A lot of chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, a lot of what are called functional gastrointestinal problems, meaning that you have gastrointestinal problems, but they can't find a physical cause.
Right.
And just this kind of whole constellation of sort of vague symptoms, pain, weakness, weight loss, fatigue, some heart disease symptoms, some muscle and joint pain, headaches, some neurological disorders, skin problems, respiratory disorders, sleep disturbance. And you know, for years, the VA kind of poo-pooed all this, but there got to be so many people that were obviously having a hard time and having similar kinds of problems that they finally started seriously looking at it medically. And the fellow that headed up this study in 2010 is a professor of neurology at one of the medical schools. And he said that it's very frustrating because his words were the symptoms are not easily quantified, which is, I think, an understatement, but very professorial of him. In any event, the bottom line was that you got all these veterans coming back from that area who have these recurring similar problems, even though they didn't know each other, they didn't serve together. So the VA has now, with congressional backing, made available benefits for folks that have this what's now called Gulf War syndrome, and it's an odd situation because normally the VA wants to have a nice, clear diagnosis of what's wrong with you before they'll even talk about service connection. But they've recognized that this constellation of these odd symptoms occurs so frequently that they have now made a special exception and made those folks eligible for benefits.
Now, let me ask this. We just got this across our Twitter feed, and I'm going to pose this question to you, and it may be something that we may have to answer on a different segment, but I find this interesting. So this gentleman's talking about, I guess him and a friend served in the Gulf War. The gentleman in question, I guess, was ambushed. He was the sole survivor, and it literally took, and he was wounded and sent back home. So it said it took like over 3 years for the War Department or the Department of Defense or whatever to recognize this gentleman's situation and award him benefits.
Well, I think actually he's talking about the Department of Veterans Affairs, Bert, and
thank you.
That's not uncommon, sadly. Our experience has been that the average time for someone to get to the level of getting an award of benefits is about 3 years and 3 months. Now, understand that's an average. So some move much more quickly, some move far more slowly. We've had cases where we've been 10 years getting people service-connected. But, it's just a very sad situation. And you heard at the outset, I'm sure, my comment about the VA was just starting to move to electronic filing. And that's part of the problem. They have been mired in the 1950s, really, for the last half century. I literally have files in my office, Bert, that they sent to me, paper files, photocopied, that come in these bankers boxes, they're about 14 inches long and a foot wide. And I get 2, 3, 4 boxes for one file. I mean, it's just crazy in terms of trying to work with that stuff. So the good news is that there is some light at the end of the tunnel in terms of they're moving to an electronic system with hopefully faster results for people who are applying for benefits. The bad news is that currently his experience is not uncommon.
You know what? And this shocks me, and I bet you it shocks a lot of our listeners, because you would think that our what do you call it, the Department of Veterans Affairs could move a little bit quicker. I mean, here's a gentleman who put his life on the line, sustained some substantial wounds or whatever, and, he's waiting 3 years to get the stuff. And as you said, as you pointed out, that's the average. That just seems outrageous, doesn't it?
It does to me, and the VA's been getting a lot of congressional scrutiny lately because of that. I mean, we're not the only ones that think that's outrageous. Congress thinks it's pretty outrageous too. But to be fair to the VA, you have to kind of look at it in perspective. Part of the problem is that, as you may know, the Veterans Administration for years was a freestanding agency which was not elevated to being a cabinet department. They only became a cabinet-level department within the last decade or so, and got renamed the Department of Veterans Affairs, even though everybody still calls them the VA. But the real issue, Bert, is like most other things in politics. It's how you slice the pie and divvy up the money. And the reality is that the VA has had a steadily growing caseload since the Gulf War in the 90s, and they haven't had a steadily growing budget. So it's more people trying to do more with less, and it's only recently that the pressure on Congress has reached the point where they're saying, gee, we really have to fix this, and we're actually going to give you some money to fix it with. So the VA is trying. It's too soon to know how well this stuff is going to work, but they're at least making an attempt. The guy that's now head of the Veterans Benefits section of the VA, Mr. Murphy, has made a real investment, in terms of his career in improving this area, and I think it's going to come off, but it's quite honestly too soon to tell. I mean, he certainly has good plans, and we'll just have to see if they can get the implementation. But he's trying, and if it works, I think things will speed up significantly.
Yeah, let's hope so, because, especially for these brave men and women, it just seems like, gosh, we're kicking them in the teeth right when they need the help most. Let me ask you this, going back to the Gulf War thing. Are there special benefits? Let me go with that. Are there special benefit issues for those who served in the Gulf War?
Really, just what we touched on a little while ago, Bert. There is this what's been described as Gulf War syndrome,
right?
And that truly is a special benefit. No other group of present or former service people can get service connection for this kind of vague constellation of symptoms. If you, for example, were a Vietnam vet and went to the VA and said, well, gee, I'm having these problems. I've got a headache, and I've got some abdominal problems, and my joints ache, and I'm having some trouble breathing, and I'm not sleeping very good. They'd say, well, go see your doctor and figure out what's wrong with you, and then come back and talk to us about whether or not it's service-connected. But for folks who served in the Gulf War, because there are so many people, and we're talking about 250,000 people that have been diagnosed with this Gulf War syndrome, and that's kind of created the critical mass to the point that Congress and the VA have responded to that and created these very special benefits that are not available to anyone else.
Gotcha. What about their families? Are there benefits for the families of those who served in the Gulf War as well?
There are, because you have service connection for Gulf War syndrome by what's called presumption, meaning that you don't have to prove the service connection if you have this constellation of symptoms. What that does, Bert, is it makes those folks eligible for benefits themselves, and also makes the families eligible for benefits when someone passes on. So The spouse, for example, is entitled to what are called DIC benefits, and that's VA speak for dependency dependency, indemnity, and compensation benefits. And what that means in everyday talk is that it's a benefit for the widow or widower. It's a monthly cash payment intended in part to replace the economic loss of a spouse from these Gulf War syndrome problems or other service-related problems. And there are also some benefits for children. There are even benefits for adult parents who are dependent on the service member for their support because they're elderly or disabled.
Gotcha. You know what? And it just blows me away. I'm absolutely left dumbfounded by today's information because so there's literally tens of thousands of people that are probably suffering not only from their injuries, but also suffering in the sense that their claims are not getting, that the claims are stuck in the red tape that is this, this very slow, almost broken bureaucracy. I mean, they're just now getting online.
It really is a classic bureaucracy in the most pejorative sense of that term, in that it moves these cases very, very slowly and with lots of what we think of as red tape. But as I said earlier, the good news is there is some hope on the horizon. It looks like things are going to improve. Unfortunately, I can't say they've improved yet, but
right.
There is hope.
Right. Well, you know what? Here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to give out your website because I think, again, this is such an important topic. It's such an important thing because this really is affecting. I mean, if it's 250,000, vets, then we're talking almost, we're probably talking several million people that are really being affected when you include the kids and the wives or spouses or whatever. So, if you're having trouble with your disability benefits, if you have questions about what you're entitled to, if you have questions about what's happening with your claim, go to Jackson-MacNichol, that's MacNichol.com, that's Jackson-MacNichol.com, and check out what these guys can do for you. Francis, as always, I appreciate you stopping by, and I really appreciate the work you're doing helping these people get their benefits.
Well, Bert, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, and I appreciated your comment about the timeliness of this right after Memorial Day, and I think it is a very timely topic. I appreciate the chance to chat with you.
All righty, sir. We'll talk to you later.
Tune in Monday through Friday here on Money for Lunch, and check out our website at moneyforlunch.com.